Oh, well, all right. The recording is live. 20 plus people are coming in 1 week after we held our annual meeting, 5 weeks, 6 weeks after we held our economic forecast, and we're back at it. It's Kitsap Digital Hour. Nice to see you out there, Kitsap. Today we're going to have two different discussions. The first discussion is one that we are advocating for, and that is that Kitsap needs better broadband. We see it as absolutely vital and connected to our economic future. We would argue that broadband is a public good, and that in order to have equity of opportunity, economic opportunity, every single person in this county needs access to broadband speeds greater than the federal definition. But I'll let our experts, Angela Bennink and Bob Hunter at the Kitsap Public Utilities District, talk about that in a bit. We're also going to hear from Jaime Forsyth today, I believe. Is that still right, Kathy or Teresa?
Correct.
Okay, and if you don't know Jaime Forsyth, you should. She is our Small Business Development Center expert here in Kitsap County, working through Western Washington University. And there's a lot going on for small business support. PPP, Payroll Protection Program, if you think you had a tough 2020, you haven't taken a Payroll Protection Program loan, talk with your lender. If you have taken a payroll protection loan, but you haven't gotten a second draw, and last year's revenues were 25% or lower than 2019's, talk to your lender. In addition to this, we're going to put in the chat the website commercegrants.com. This is really important to talk about, Working Washington Round 4. If you were forced to close last year related to public health mandates, if you're a restaurant, if you're a fitness center, if you're a small business venue, if you're an arts venue, the hospitality organization, hotel, small hotel, right? The list goes on and on. Apply for Working Washington Round 4. You only have until April 9th. And one of the nice things about that website, commercegrants.com, is that there is an extensive helpline and email help system that has been built out to help you apply for this program in the next 9 days. Highly recommend both of these products. In addition, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is launching. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant is launching. We're going to hear from Jaime Forsyth about that today. But first, most importantly, we're going to talk a little bit of broadband with the experts. And so I'm going to just sneeze because these things happen, and I apologize for that. There's no good, you know what? Let me turn it over to Bob and Angela and sneeze. Bob and Angela, you've got the con. See you in a bit.
Right on. First, I'd like to say hi to everybody. And I'm Bob Hunter. I'm the GM at Kitsap. And I want to thank Joe and his team for having us here today. KEDA has been a great partner of Kitsap PUD. I'm going to give a brief background on Kitsap PUD, and then I'll turn it over to Angela Bennink, the district's telecommunications director. Just so everybody knows, Kitsap PUD is governed by 3 commissioners, Deborah Lester, Heather Pauley, and Jim Sevilla, who represents us with KEDA. Kitsap PUD actually provides 4 separate utility services. We're a water purveyor that operates and manages more than 80 water systems throughout Kitsap County. We have also constructed a regional system that connects Seebeck to Silverdale and Paulsbo, then on to Kingston and Hansville. Both Silverdale Water District and the city of Paulsbo have been partners with this endeavor. Through an MOU with Kitsap County, we are the water resource managers for Kitsap, where we monitor aquifers, stream flows, and precipitation, ensuring water will be available for our environment and population growth. In 2015, we received sewer authority through a vote of the people. This allowed us to remove the aging wastewater treatment plant and outfall for the community of Port Gamble, opening up 90 acres of commercial gooey duck harvest. We replaced the aging plant with a membrane bioreactor where we treat the effluent to drinking water standards and return it to its natural state, contributing to our streams and aquifers. Given Kitsap's geography of being surrounded by saltwater and having many rural waterfront communities, I believe over the next several years, the district will see extensive utility growth in this area. Currently, Kitsap wastes more than 1 billion gallons of water a year into the Puget Sound through its wastewater treatment facilities. At some point, it will be critical that we capture that water, get it back on the ground, leak it back into our aquifers to support the needs and to combat climate change. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Angela Bennink, our Telecommunications Director, to talk about broadband. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Joe. I think Joe, you touched on something that is really important for us, and that is the equity of opportunity and how we take that first step. I do have a series of slides here to share, and so I will go through these, and we'll. Is that working okay? First of all. Okay. So I'll go through these, but please feel free to ask questions, any questions you may have during this presentation. And you can use, I think Kathy pointed out or Teresa pointed out, the Q&A or the chat. Okay, so I will pop into a little bit. I'm all about broadband. I've been here at Kitsap PUD as staff for 3 years, but I've worked with Kitsap PUD for about 15 years with Northwest Open Access Networks, which is a statewide broadband company that is owned by public utility districts. So to talk a little bit about the history of where Kitsap is and where we came from. So in 2000, PUDs were given the authority to provide wholesale broadband services. And for those of you Kitsap PUD residents who are long-term, you may remember we had 3 different telephone carriers. We had Quest, Century Tel, and Embark. And so for some areas of our county and for school districts, you ended up with long distance charges just to call between a school and a school district office. And so that truly was the driver for Kitsap PUD to take this step. And so the Kitsap PUD did obtain long-term bonds and built a figure-8 backbone throughout the county. And it truly was to connect all the anchor institutions, such as schools, libraries, government entities, the state ferry, all those different entities. And now today we're still providing that service, and we provide a carrier grade transport network. We're providing 100 gig transport to naval bases, cell tower backhaul. Actually, cell tower is not 100 gig, but we do have high capacity services to the cell tower. And then also providing a high capacity, high quality service to the small business. We are committed to maintaining a community owned, high speed, open access fiber optic network. And I'll go to the next one. So this took us to the next step. What does this mean for residences? So we had this network, we're providing this service for 15 years or so, and now we're getting people in the office, right? They're coming in and saying, I want something at my house. And all we had at that time was the business class service, which can be quite expensive for a resident to do. So in 2015, we launched the COS service zones application and started to receive surveys from individuals telling us what their service was, where they lacked service, and whether or not they would even want Kitsap PUD to try to solve this lack of access. So this heat map that I'm showing here, and if anybody would like a copy of that, I'd be happy to share it with you. I know it can be a little small on this screen. But you can see the differences in colors. And areas that are yellow are areas that self-reported they did not have access to infrastructure. And because we had so many responses, this over time we've been able to increase the reliability of this heat map to really show where there is service and where there's not. As you can see in our cities, we're looking pretty good. And it is around more of the rural areas that we did not have any access to broadband service. So in 2016, we started a residential network, and this is separate from our express network. So it's not, they're not riding on the same bandwidth, and they're able to be treated a little differently in how they're managed. And have continued, and that first year we actually turned up 25 customers, but we've been continuing to grow and are now serving just at 900 residents in the county. In 2019, we built out more fiber to these rural areas, and it's middle mile fiber, so it doesn't go all the way to the house. It goes to on the main roads. I like to think of it as if it's a county road, that's probably where we're building versus a private driveway or a private road. So we built 25 miles in 2019, and we felt, we were really meeting the needs at that time and expanding as much as we could. Then 2020 hit. So we ended up with stay home, stay healthy. And immediately education, work, community involvement, communication with your friends, family, shopping, everything, all of it went online. And for a lot of people, this was overwhelming. And the situation actually became desperate for many of our residents within the county who did not have a choice to increase service from a service provider. They had no service provider providing broadband services. So the board chose to supplement our existing capital budget by going out for a bond in April of 2020. And that increased our middle mile expansion with another 45 miles. And I will tell you at this time, when you look at that map on the slide before, we are now providing middle mile fiber into virtually every area that had yellow, that is not being served in the county at this time. It doesn't mean we're providing that fiber to the residents at this time, but the main lines are there to connect residents to. In addition to that, we installed 10 Wi-Fi sites because we know actually building fiber to residents takes time. So how could we serve our community today with a temporary service? I put quote or question mark after temporary because our thoughts were we'd have this up till January of 2021, because clearly the pandemic would be over, we'd all be back to school and we wouldn't need this. So now we're thinking we'll probably leave these 10 sites up. They're located in areas that do not have access to homes at this time, but we have middle mile being built through so we can provide high capacity service. And I do have to say 2 of those sites are actually run via cellular because there is no fiber to those areas at all. And our thoughts right now are to keep those up until the start of the next school year and further if they're still needed. Addition, we added 3 new FTEs to our budget and have hired 2 of those to really help us respond to the demand that's there from our community. And we have hopefully a 3rd hire happening here very soon. So let me talk really quick about what we're providing when we provide this residential solution. We are committed to a high-speed, quality network to provide residents to broadband services. This means that we're not going to provide a small bandwidth solution. So we have built an all fiber network. It is at this point, because of the way we've built it and we're using an active Ethernet type of configuration, this is the most future-proof we can do right now. We are open to other technologies. We continue to look at those other technologies. One of the examples would be the low orbit satellites. There is some funding for SpaceLink in Kitsap County from the FCC to look at putting some more of those in. At this time, though, that is not future-proofing our residents. So any funds that we're looking at investing, whether those are federal, state, or from the county itself, we're looking at providing a service that can last or that can serve the needs today, but also last into the future. So we're not having to rebuild another network when we are bandwidth constrained again. So we do have all fiber. I mentioned active Ethernet. It is a fully symmetrical service. So we are providing uploads and download speeds that are the same. All residents are equipped with a gigabit at their home, with 100 megabit being the smallest service we are port size we are providing. Again, we are open access. And so you're buying the actual service, the internet service from a service provider. We do have multiple service providers to choose from. And right now there are 5. There has been some consolidation recently between 2 of those service providers. But once we had 2, we saw, because we started with 1, once we had 2, we saw the prices and the services that residents had access to become much better for them. So really supporting and really committed to this open access network and being able to support our retailers on that system. One of the things that we want to, one of the things I want to point out, these symmetrical speeds are very important for people working from home or doing interactive Zooms, things of those types. When you have multiple high capacity programs needing to draw on that service that you have, you're able to provide that much better when you have a high upload speed. Many of our carriers right now don't have high upload speeds, and that's the challenge a lot of our residents are seeing. Even though the download speeds are great, they can get data to them. Sending it back up has been the biggest challenge on that. We may not be the most, we may not be the least expensive solution. And in some cases, we're probably a fairly high cost solution. This is because we are charging the residents for the cost to connect their home. Now, we are looking at what we can do internally to support residents, and we continue to be as flexible as possible. And grants, of course, will play into that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, our biggest ability is to allow people to pay those construction costs off over a long-term financing mechanism. And what we're using is the local utility district mechanism. So this is just an LUD, similar to an LID or a CRID. And it is a financing mechanism for a group of homeowners to pay for the construction costs for the public utility district over time. For us, working with telecom, we have determined that a 20-year term is a good cost-effective solution for many of our residents. So we are using a 20-year term on that assessment payback. It is guaranteed by a lien against the property, and this is how we as a public entity can allow homeowners to finance it, because it is secured by that lien against the property. The key here for LUDs is that the value of the infrastructure and the upgrade of that infrastructure to a home increases the property value of that home by that amount or more. Another item on LUDs that's very important is communities pay the same amount. They get together as a team and they all divide up the cost amongst them. This is not something driven by Kitsap PUD. This is something supported by us. And this is a mechanism that we help residents do, but all residents participating in LUDs are coming to us. They come to us with a petition, and then that board acts on that petition, whether that is 50% plus one, which requires in legislation, in the RCW, that is when a board is required to act, but they can actually act with less as well. We do take our time with these LUDs and make sure we're reaching out to as many people as possible that could participate to reduce those total costs to homeowners when they take that step. So that is really our business today, how we're addressing the tools that we're using to serve our residents and the type of infrastructure that we're putting in place. But what are our current challenges? So our current challenges are equitable access. Again, even though we've built out the middle mile fiber, we still have challenges with people connecting to that fiber. So you end up with infrastructure challenges, and then you also end up with accessibility or affordability challenges. And that's really the one of the hurdles that the PUD hasn't worked on addressing as much until very recently. And that is because we don't have the authority to provide service to homeowners. And most of the funding for that type of service is given to that person or is provided through that retail service provider. But those are still our challenges. Funding to continue to build out where we can. Another thing that I want to mention is conduit placement. So we work a lot with developers as they're building new developments to say, please place conduit in, because once that development is built, it is too expensive for homeowners to fund bringing the infrastructure in from conduit. Now, if the conduit's already there connecting the homes, then we're able to pull that fiber through and connect those homes fairly easily. And we do have a couple of communities that we are the only service provider in their new developments. And so it can be, it's a very big benefit for those residents, but they don't have the option of choosing from CenturyLink or a Comcast or a Wave at this time in those developments. So we do encourage putting in infrastructure to allow for competition and to allow for access to this network. I put up a couple options or things here for the broadband access funding. And again, we're not able to address that right now, but there is quite a bit of money coming into our county right now for FCC Lifeline. And those are used to be for your telephone system, and they, as of next year, will only be for broadband. In addition, there is an emergency broadband fund that's happening right now that just started. Another challenge we have is responding to the demand sustainably. So this is something where the staffing is important to make sure we can continue to fund the staff that we need without just hiring a bunch of people to deal with the demand. And so we have this challenge of being able to deal with that demand sustainably. Restrictions on authority, I mentioned that already. That is still a challenge for us. And really it's about accessing federal funds. And I'll talk a little bit more about that next. And then access to materials is a challenge right now. It has started this fall, and it is from fiber and electronics, just people buying those, to conduit. Conduit is in short supply right now. So we see the cost continuing to increase on those. We do expect that to catch up though, and it to go back to a fairly inexpensive per foot cost. But it's because of everything that's happening in the country and the world right now with construction, we do see our costs associated with materials increase, and also our costs associated with labor is increasing as well. So current opportunity, and I know Jamie is going to touch more on some of the grant opportunities that are out there, but I just wanted to bring this up. There are a lot of grants. There's going to be an NTIA broadband infrastructure grant. There's an RUS infrastructure grant. We've got Community Economic Revitalization Board, the Public Works Board, state, and those are both within the Department of Commerce, as well as the State Broadband Office. And really the focus there is infrastructure and affordability. And so those are the keys to being able to get people connected to broadband and allowing them the opportunity to participate in the digital economy that we're seeing. There is no details yet on what that funding looks like. There's no rules out. There's just these huge numbers being floated for what can be done. There's just no notices of funding availability or notices of funding opportunities out yet. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen in the next couple months with the federal and state offices to make sure they are pushing those out in an equitable way. The other thing that we are working closely on too is coordinating with the other public entities in Kitsap County. And that includes the Kitsap County itself, the cities of Bainbridge Island, Bremerton, Port Orchard, and Paulsbo, Kitsap Regional Library, Fire Districts, Parks, and Kitsap Transit. There's a lot of different ways to participate within the public entities to better serve our residents. And I'll give an example with Kitsap Transit is we don't have as many people using the park and rides. So if we can turn those park and rides into an access point for people who don't have services at home, that can be a way to better serve our communities, and you provide that infrastructure and that resource for those entities who are using that park and ride. I am going to actually wrap up now, and I do want to, this is all our contact information, so you have that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But I want to hand it back over to Bob really quickly, because very timely right now is our legislation efforts. While they're not driven by Kitsap PUD, we are greatly engaged because it would affect how we're able to serve our community. So I'll hand that over to Bob, and then we'll be available to answer any questions. Bob.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Angela. And before we totally walk away from her presentation on this, I want to do a couple of shout outs, because, you know, when Angela's talking about these LUDs, so when you complete an LUD, you got to sell bonds. And I will tell you, there's two local entities that have really made this easy for Kitsap PUD. Kitsap Bank has been extremely helpful in this process. And their goal is to really help the citizens of Kitsap. And also another entity, a Paulsbo entity, Alpha Ledger. So the combination of these two entities have enabled the district to better manage our cash flow to get these projects done. So I had to bring that up. Now, as far as legislation, there's two bills that are still alive and moving, and we hope they both successfully get out. That being said, I want to be clear. These bills are to give PUDs and port districts and small towns retail authority, broadband retail authority. And so for PUDs, I can't really speak for port districts on this, but for PUDs, it's not really, we all provide open access networks where we like the idea of service providers competing for your business through price and services. But without retail authority, we cannot access the majority of billions of dollars that is going to be available. So if it doesn't happen this session, we will not be able to go after this money. It's that simple. And so it would seem like this should be a slam dunk, but it's not, like anything. So I will tell you, I'm going to start with Senate Bill 1336, or actually House Bill 1336. Representative Hansen from Bainbridge Island is who introduced this bill. And this bill is for PUDs. This would be the one, if we got to choose, this would be the one we would choose, because it simply gives you retail authority. It allows us to compete directly with the privates. And, you know, I recognize that we have some good players as privates. That being said, the reason we have these unserved areas is because the privates simply are not going to do it. There is not enough homes per square mile for them to invest their dollars. So I would say that Representative Hansen's bill is the one we would choose because it just purely gives you retail authority, which will allow us to access any and all federal funds to support our community. And recognize, as Angela was addressing earlier, we don't even know the rules to some of these. So if they limit our ability to be a retailer in certain instances, when the grant comes out federally, it might eliminate our ability to get it. It just doesn't seem to make sense. And recognize in both of these bills, we want them to force us to maintain an open access network. So we can't become this monopoly in broadband. The other bill is Senator Wellman's bill. It's Senate Bill 5383. Senator Wellman, who really wants broadband out there, but her bill restricts us to the unserved area. And while Kitsap PUD, since 2016, 2017, have been building to the unserved area, we have been strictly looking at these areas as well. That being said, it eliminates our ability to work directly with our school districts to provide the equity funds. So if this bill was the only bill to come out, it would give us the ability to go after retail authority for most of these federal funds. Only will allow you to use them in the unserved areas anyway. So in that part, it's good. But when it comes to equity, when it comes to those who can't afford it, what Kitsap PUD does today is really for those who can afford it. If we reduce the cost, it's viewed as a gift of public funds from our point and the state auditor's point. Therefore, we have to charge, just like a water connection or a sewer connection. You have this capital connection up front. And many times that's just not affordable. So really, that's the difference between the two bills. And we're working with both legislators. And when I say that, Kitsap PUD's lobbyist and myself and Angela are, at least 3 times a day, we are talking to them to try and get this thing through. And so any help that all of you can give support, right? Email your legislators, tell them support both 1336 and 5383. We got to have one of them come out, if not both, in order to access these funds. And it would be a shame, it would be a real shame if at the end of the day, nothing happened here. So anyway, that's all I have.
Thanks, Bob. And I do see there's a couple questions. So Teresa, I look to you, and Kathy, if you'd like me to address those, or.
Yeah, so there's 2 questions in the Q&A, but there were also some questions early in the chat. So he kind of addressed this. How do you effectively partner to leverage the potential federal infrastructure package to bring broadband to everyone because of the equity issue?
I think this is going to depend on what the funding is. So for example, we did apply for a distance learning and telemedicine grant last year, and we did work with KDH to have that support and understanding that this was for our rural communities and able to provide that service. We were not awarded it. It did not, we had too many fiber to the home connections for them to consider that as being awarded, even though distance learning right now is all being done at homes. And that was our argument. It did not get funded. But that is an example. Another example is working with the state agencies and the state broadband office, and working with the other municipalities in the state or the public agencies in the state to create these consortium grants and to have this matching funds available that allow us to be able to take that next step.
Okay, yeah, I believe we worked with you on some curb grants.
Oh, yes, you did too. We actually, yes, we did get a Community Economic and Revitalization Board grant. We built, it's about 7 miles of fiber using that grant and served over 120 residents. And it was a fairly expensive build itself. So it was going to be over $10,000 for each of those residents to connect. And using the grant, we are now, I don't know the exact number, but I do know it's around 6,000.
Super.
Yeah.
Okay. How many end users in Kitsap County are currently served by KPUD fiber? And why make this investment in rural areas if satellite internet deployment is forthcoming? I'm assuming they are referencing Starlink.
Yes. So, which I called Space Link earlier, but Starlink is correct. So we have 900 residents on our network right now. We do have more people with the infrastructure to their homes. However, we don't require people to buy service. So some people have built this in as an investment when they're ready to sell, and we allow that to happen. But we do have 900 active residents on our network. Why continue to invest when Starlink is happening and you have those low orbit satellites? It is because of the future proofing of the network. And as I was mentioning earlier, Starlink is a great solution for the rural areas where you don't have fiber available at all. For example, the Ho tribe is one of the areas that is trialing that with Starlink. You still have the speed of light, and we will never be able to, I take that back. I'm sure there's a lot of warp speed fans and things like that, but we still have the speed of light. So you still will have latency issues, even getting to low orbit satellites. It is working great for downloading. It is working great when you have, you're having something that can buffer. And we do have a colleague who's utilizing this up in Hansville area and trialing it out to see if it'll work for them. And they say it is great to watch videos. It is great to have that low demand services such as email, things like that. But video conferencing is still challenging for that service right now. It also has a set bandwidth, and that has more ability to grow than the being able to overcome the speed of light. But it is still challenging to have more than that 100 meg. And because there is that set bandwidth, they do reduce the upload speeds to increase the download speeds. So you do, it's a good solution. It's much less expensive than building fiber to the home. It's ideal for areas that you don't have infrastructure already out there like we do here in Kitsap County. With that said, I mean, Starlink was tentatively awarded $88 million to provide access in Washington State. And that did include areas of Kitsap County.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the cost of middle mile paid by user fees, is the cost of middle mile paid by user fees, or is it a community service and covered by all PUD customers and grants?
It's a little bit more than, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We actually are a taxing entity. And so we do tax the residents of Kitsap County. And those funds are first used for water resource management and then used for broadband expansion. It is around $800,000 a year that we use from that to extend broadband services. So that's the middle mile part of this. We know if we keep down the path we are going, we won't be able to reach all of the unserved unless we're looking at 20 years out, right? So we won't be able to provide that service. Now, our long-term bond that we took out in 2020 is being paid for by revenue from the telecommunications business as a whole.
Cool. So it says you encourage the conduit sleeving for the
Yeah.
new developments. Can you require it as part of the permitting process?
Unfortunately, we cannot. We cannot require it, but other municipalities can. So for instance, Kitsap County, these cities could require this. This is something City of Paulsville put in about 10 years ago, actually about 10 years ago. And so City of Paulsville, all those new developments in City of Paulsville have conduit available for pulling fiber into them. Greatly reduces the costs. There is some engineering that is required. You can't just say conduit, otherwise the developer may lay it as the cheapest way possible. So you do have to provide some engineering to be able to say you need to cross the street, we need to have a vault, you need to have those things. And our engineering staff has worked with City of Paulsville to provide that resource to developers when they're in there doing that. This is the dig once policies that you may have heard of. They're great. They're great for our community. They're great. We should be encouraging this, and are talking with other entities now to encourage that.
Great. Yeah. There's 5. So there's 4 cities and the county all issuing permits. So it's not quite as easy as one would like it to be, perhaps. As a public entity, in what ways would KPUD be in direct competition with Xfinity, Comcast, Wave Cable, and in theory, would that help to lower those bigger company costs?
You know, it could. It very easily could. One of the areas where our focus is the unserved. So we're not in direct competition and are providing a service that people don't have access to. A lot of support from CenturyLink to do this, right? They're not going to invest in our rural communities to upgrade them to the services they need right now. They support us. They support us in doing it. It's reducing their costs overall and allowing our residents to have access. In areas where it is served, where people have Comcast, where the people have CenturyLink, they are paying for that infrastructure to be brought out. And so could it affect it? Yes, 900 customers right now that we have turned up with only a few of those in served areas. It's probably not enough to affect the cost at this time. In 10 years, will it affect? Maybe.
Okay, let's see. I think there was one backup that's kind of related to a previous one about the infrastructure stimulus. As you know, the broadband industry is also concerned about the plan's focus on municipality or city-owned networks getting a preference for funding over private companies offering broadband service. So what would be the response to that?
Go ahead, Bob. I was just going to say, as a private entity, I think it's great. Or a public entity. Go ahead.
So this is exactly why Senator Wellman's bill is constructed the way it is. It's to protect the incumbents to allow publics not to go after the federal funding that they have access to currently. So it just depends on how you want to look at this world. These are our tax dollars. And, so from where I sit, they've been gathering billions of dollars every year for how many years? And we have these areas that are unserved. So is it time to allow the publics to compete for those dollars? It's a good question. Like I said, I'm a big advocate of requiring publics to use open access networks and not to become monopolies. And it is for that reason. I believe in capitalism. But this has become a utility that the capitalism part of our world has decided, hey, Kitsap County, you created urban growth areas. You gave us a target to go serve. So we're not going to serve those other areas because there's no money in it. And so, but, the fact is to serve those areas, You might need some of those more urban areas to support, to make a sustainable network. Okay, so those are the challenges we're faced with. That is precisely why the difference in the two bills too. So I hope I answered that right.
Well, if you didn't, they can contact you, right?
Sure.
So there's two more questions right now. So on the city requirement to bring fiber in or the conduit, is it still up to the developer to bring it to the individual homes?
At this time, we have worked with developers to support that, whether we're providing the conduit and they're providing the labor to put that in, or whether we're doing all of that. I think it would be great if you could require all of the conduit to be placed, because fiber to the home and being connected to a community network does have value associated with it. Many of the developers are supportive of putting this in themselves.
Well, and I know for years, in every meeting I've been in regarding infrastructure and streets, there's been the discussion of why are we not laying the conduit when we rip up streets?
Right. Right. And so we do try to, as much as our budget allows.
You know, I'd like to give an example. So Old Town Silverdale is being torn up right now, right? Because putting a new sewer main in. I will tell you the challenge that Kitsap PUD has here, you know, the cost to us to put conduit in there is nearly $50,000. And it is a served area. Comcast is putting new conduit in as well. You know, we are paying the $50,000, but the challenge that Kitsap's board and management team have here is, could I use that $50,000 to do more areas of unserved? And so, you know, these are the challenges we're faced with every day. I will guarantee you one thing: the day we're done in the unserved territories, the urban area will say, well, what happened? How did we get left out? How do we not have choice? And the rural areas have choice. You know, so we know we're going to be there. We try to do the best we can. And if we could get retail authority across the board, it will enable us to go after money so that we could then use our other dollars to support those areas of community growth.
Great. And I think this is the last question, and we want to leave time for Jaime. I think I heard you say, this is from Linda, that the liens put on people's homes will be for 20 years. Does that include updates to the infrastructure?
So the 20-year lien it does include updates, in that the only thing we need to update in all fiber network is the lasers on the ends, right? And so this may be the equipment we put at your house right now that's just over $300, that piece of equipment, and then the laser that's in our distribution switch. So that is one of the reasons why we did an all fiber network and an active Ethernet network instead of a PON, a passive optical network. It is a little more expensive to put those in active Ethernet, but we're able to, because we don't have the splitting, we are able to upgrade that very easily by just changing out the equipment on the two ends.
Super.
And all maintenance repairs, all of that comes with the monthly fee that we charge to the service provider for that residence.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Okay,
Yep.
Joe, I'm going to kick it back to you.
And I'm here, and I just posted probably the longest chat I've ever posted. We're fully behind this. We're fully behind KPUD. Broadband is a remarkable necessity. But let's move on and go to Jaime Forsyth, because it's also vital that our small businesses in this community survive the economic associations and winds of COVID. We are coming out of this. There's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. Jaime, what is the latest on grant and financial support programs for small business?
Thanks, Joe. I'm looking forward to the time where my little updates become irrelevant and unnecessary. So I will say, I'll start it off with an April Fool's joke, because regarding that restaurant revitalization fund, you know how I was exhorting everybody, all the restaurants, to get their DUNS number and sign up for sam.gov. We just learned as of Tuesday that that's not going to be necessary. And we were hoping that was the case, but until we knew it was not the case, and we knew it would take you weeks to sign up for it, when I searched nationwide, everybody was exhorting restaurants to just start the process to sign up just in case. But it's not going to be needed, and they routed it through a different organization to avoid the need to be signed up in that registry to get a federal grant. So whatever they had to do, good on them, because that was going to be a train wreck. But anyway, so the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, I know we probably have more restaurants than anything else in terms of what's going on right now. And I'll just say, we have no date for when that's going to be coming, when we're going to have more information about that. So just stay tuned on that. It just, if you think about it, this Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, it's only going live on April 8th, and that was part of that December 27th legislation as well. So things are taken in order, I think. And I think now that once that's launched, I assume, we might get around, we might hear a timeline for when we'll know more about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which is going to be a pretty exciting opportunity for our restaurants, because it's, revenue replacement, the difference between 2019 and 2020, which is pretty big for most people. So beyond that, I would say I'm still exhorting people to check if you got $0 to $9,000 for your target, for your EIDL advance. Remember, that was last year. Some people don't even remember, but also, and some people swore to me they did not sign up for that, and I made them check their bank statement, and they did. So it might be worth it for everyone to check for that targeted, what was it? Targeted EIDL at sba.gov. But anyway, they rolled out between February 1st and into March. So if you checked once back in February or early March, you may still have gotten something if you think you should be getting that in your inbox. So do be aware that that could be up to a $10,000 boondoggle just by knowing, to check your email. And that did happen. I had one woman on KEDA when I was talking about this, check her inbox and report back that she's now getting $9,000 that she didn't know she was getting. She found it in her junk mail. It had come a couple weeks earlier. So it's a real thing. Those are not fake emails. Let's see what else is going on. I'm scanning. I've got my yesterday's presentation open from another group, and I'm scanning to see what else I've forgotten. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, of course, is opening April 8th. We've got a webinar we're doing at 1 o'clock today for the SBA. One of my colleagues, Julia Lara, and I are doing. And so we hope to see, a lot of people there. It's a pretty specific niche grant. So we know it doesn't quite have the wide appeal of the PPP. I will also tell you that if you're a smaller venue and you've never done one of these before, it's a very complex process to get a federal grant. And it's not set up to be friendly to small organizations. I have personal experience with this. We had a team focused for 2 months on putting in our application. Kathy Kokas knows about this. Putting in our application to the federal grant, and we had to start with getting our DUNS number and our SAM registration. And even that took way longer than it should have. And then in the end, we ended up having 2 people tag teaming with a checklist and going over 28 documents that we had to attach and submit properly. So it's not a process for the faint of heart. And what I would recommend to anyone who's never done this before and is thinking they're going to apply for this is, as fast as you can, apply for a PPP first. I don't know which banks are available right now, because there's been that turnover where they were going to close as of March 31st. Now that it's being extended to May 31st. But once you apply for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, you are no longer eligible to apply for a PPP. So there's no downside to applying for a PPP now, because if you get one, all it does is offset the amount you would get from the shuttered venue operators grant. So hopefully that makes sense, but you're not going to get, you can never in any way possible for a 2021 PPP, you can't add it to what you would get from the shuttered venue operators grant. So to make sure you get something, I'd do that PPP. And then again, it'll just be subtracted from the amount you're awarded for the shuttered venue operators grant. Let's see, what other exciting things do I have? The Working Washington 4 grant, it started out slowly from what we've heard in the last day. Started out very slowly. We haven't gotten the wave of phone calls and emails like we did earlier. The whole point of the Working Washington 4, not the whole point, but kind of the idea of it is to get people up to $25,000. And so it's gonna be considered what you've gotten in any previous round. So if you've already gotten $25,000, it's a, don't bother. And, maybe everyone in Kitsap was, on top of these things and, is already up there. But anyway, so that's the point of that is you, for a total of any of the rounds, you won't get more than 25,000.
And Jamie, just to clarify, it's not all CARES grants, it's just the Working Washington grant.
Yes. Right.
So for kids,
Oh, yeah.
that would be the Working Washington Small Business Emergency Grant that was almost a year ago, and now is known as Working Washington 1. And then the grant that we called KDH CARES is actually Working Washington 2. Any other CARES grants that you received in Kitsap are not subject to that subtraction from Working Washington 4.
Right. Thank you
I
for
know
that.
it can be confusing.
Yeah, it's totally confusing.
I just wanted to emphasize, if you've said it, but if you're going after the shuttered venue grant and you do not have your DUNS number and your SAM registration, you are behind the curve.
Yeah, we've already heard reports that things are going slow in terms of getting these. They say up to 2 weeks, and that's normal times. I don't think these are normal times. And, and you have to have it in order to apply. And the other key thing about this is going to be a horse race for the SVOG because it's going to be first come, first serve. And then within that, though, there are priorities. So it's basically first come, first serve if you've suffered a 90% or greater loss. And then there's, some other tiers. But if in the first tier, they haven't fulfilled all of the eligible 90% or more entities, they will bump up to the head of the next phase. So they really want to take care of the hardest hit first. Nobody knows when the money is going to run out. And so there is a set aside for small businesses. There's $2 billion set aside for 59 days. I don't know what the magic of 59 is, but maybe it's just someone's favorite number.
Yeah. Well, let's just remember federal government, magic.
Well, I think it was you clearly, as someone who is going to be presenting this in a couple hours, it was built by committee, and so there are things that just don't make sense, but to me anyway, but they made sense to someone when it was added. And I also would say that things change, so we can only always say that, it was the latest information, at the time. But again, the big thing is, you have to have that, your SAM registration, or you can't even apply. And if you think it's like, I'll just tell you, I'll just say this for Kathy Kokos, because she would never say this, but people reviewing these, like Kitsap grants, for example, were very forgiving about the carelessness of some people's responses to some of the questions, I think, in terms of following rules, shall we say. But the federal government will not be, forgiving whatsoever. So keep that in mind. And I think Joe just came on, which was a great little, waving flag. So fortunately, I have no time for questions.
Well, and you're very reachable, Jamie, via email. We'll put your email in the chat. If you're a small business, we highly recommend working with the SBDC. lots of resources. We've got some on the screen. We will see you the first Thursday of May at 11 a.m. for the next digital hour. We're probably going to be talking about growth in Kitsap, but we're working on that. And we appreciate everybody. Angela, Bob, Jamie, thanks for spending time with us. Thanks for doing what you do for our community, and keep in touch, Kitsap. See you later. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.